From the Orleans Hotel in Las Vegas, welcome to Muscular Development's coverage of the 2015 Joe Weider's Olympia weekend. This gentleman to my left, Shawn Ray, here covering his 28th Olympia. Peter McGough to my right here on his 33rd Olympia. I'm covering my 17th, and MD is going to be on the ground covering this weekend every step of the way. We have MD's Bob Ciccarello at the podium on Friday night and Saturday night. We have folks on the ground, really, literally out on the streets here at the Orleans Hotel, at the Orleans Arena, and we're going to be covering this event really with unprecedented coverage. And Peter, you are, of course, the senior member of this troop, so I'm going to let you get it started. How does it feel to be back in Vegas for our biggest weekend of the year?
Yeah, it always races up on us, doesn't it? You know, again, this year we're months away from it and suddenly it's here. And again, you know, we've got some great storylines in here. Even though I've been to a few, I still get a buzz for the Olympia. It's the, you know, the creme de la creme. It's the Super Bowl. It's the FA Cup final, if that means anything over here, soccer term. So I'm really looking forward to it, and I think we're going to have a great show.
Well, in an unusual twist, the biggest stories of the weekend typically are what goes on stage. But for those of you, of course, who follow the sport closely and have been keeping tabs here at musculardevelopment.com and really around the bodybuilding internet universe, a really big story has unfolded over the last few days, and it involves not a guy who is going to be competing, but somebody who is not going to be competing, because just a couple days ago, about 48 hours ago, word came in when Kai Greene, the man who's finished second here at this contest each of the last 3 years, put out a very emotional video, Shawn, announcing or confirming rumors that he is in fact going to be foregoing this year's event, a storyline that, of course, is going to really serve as a cloud over this entire weekend. And as much as we're going to try to focus on the athletes who are competing, the absence of Kai Greene is a big, big story.
Well, yeah, I mean, the big story is that the fans lose out because Kai is the guy that would be the heir apparent, or at least the number one threat to fill Heath. He's got 3 first Olympia runner-ups. He's got 2 Arnold Classic victories and a slew of other competitions that he's won. And we were waiting for his arrival, ripe old age of 40 plus. We saw the pictures online. He looked like he was doing the business. What struck me as odd is that, you know, the protocol has always been have these contracts in July. I know when I used to compete and I got that contract in the mail, that would be the first thing I got out of the way. Sign it, send it back, and it was the same every year. The verbiage was the same this year. I don't know what the holdup is. I still haven't got a concrete definition of why you would not sign that agreement that is exactly like it was a year ago and all the other times that you competed in the show. So to see those tears come from Kai, I think the reality of not competing in this show hit him right smack in the face. However, he's always had the opportunity to be a participant. All he had to do was sign on the dotted line.
And it was interesting because when Kai made the announcement, Peter, he discussed the fact that he was not being allowed to compete here at the Olympia. And of course, the Olympia promoter, Robin Chang, swiftly responded. And it was actually a story that just broke last night where Robin did an interview and he answered some of those questions. And he said quite emphatically that Kai Greene, right up until last night, had every opportunity to compete. All he had to do was sign the contract just like the other 100 or so athletes that are here in Las Vegas competing in various divisions in the Olympia. Kai did not do that. That is why, according to Robin Chang, that he is not competing. This wasn't some coalition against Kai Greene, according to Robin Chang. This is just the fact that Kai, for reasons of his own, chose not to compete or not to fill out the contract, and as a result, that's why we're in this spot right now.
Yeah, the background is pretty convoluted. I mean, it's an instance where the business side has met the sporting side and everybody's lost. You know, the fans have lost. I think that what we have to do now is to say, look, Kai's not here. It was his decision. Let's concentrate on the guys who are in the rooms now getting ready, to give it their all. They're here, put it on the line. There's all sorts of things flying around. Kai's got a new company. Did he want to come into the Olympia and maybe finish 4th or 5th? Is that good for the new company? I don't think that's the case. But all these theories will start to swirl around, like Kai Gate we've got now. And I think it's unfair that it's taken away from the athletes who have trained all year, dieted for months, and will be there on the day. And I'm not casting any aspersions on Kai because I understand it. Like I said before, it's a set of circumstances I've never heard about in Olympia history where the contest has always been separate. The business side has always been separate. Here they got intermingled, and we have a casualty.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that. 33 years you've been doing this, and never once have you encountered anything close to this.
No, I mean, we've had contracts not signed before. We had the instance of Kevin Leveroni that Shawn knows very well in like 2002. He got berated at the athletes meeting by Wayne DeMillier, but he was allowed in. Arnold showing up in 1980 at the dressing room without signing. But, here we are. It's modern day. It's professional. As Shawn says, sign the contract weeks before, get it in, make sure it's in there, and then continue. But I think we've got a situation where maybe Kai's backed himself into a corner and feels he has no recourse now. To me, I'd still let him in the contest, to be honest, but I would say from now on to every athlete, whoever enters the Olympia, you have to get that contract back by the end of July or whatever the date is. No exceptions from now on. It's been a loose rule because it's never been an issue. It's an issue now. So get those contracts in on time from here on in.
And a lot of people wonder, what's the importance of these contracts? The contract, of course, is an instrument that gives the event the authority to use the image of the athlete in promoting the contest, and it also entitles the athlete to all the benefits of being here. So it is a two-way document. The question now becomes, with Kai out of the Olympia, Phil Heath is here gunning for his 5th title. If he's able to win on Saturday night, he would be just 1 shy of Dorian Yates, 2 shy of Arnold, and 3 shy of that hollowed ground, which of course is occupied by the great Lee Haney and Ronnie Coleman. With Kai out of the contest, give us sort of a general sense for what it does to this lineup, not just in terms of solidifying Phil as the obvious favorite, but really what it does, further down the lineup.
Well, I mean, let's just go back to a year ago. A lot of people arguably had Dennis Wolf in 2nd place and not Kai Greene. So even if Kai had shown up, he potentially could have gotten knocked off, and Dennis Wolf would be challenging Phil Heath with a totally different package. Kai not being in the show doesn't take Phil Heath's foot off the gas pedal. Phil Heath has been driven by trying to become Mr. Olympia by all the things that come with being Mr. Olympia, not by Kai Greene. Kai Greene wasn't the reason he competes in this show, nor Dennis Wolf. Dennis Wolf wants to be Mr. Olympia just as bad as Phil Heath wants to remain Mr. Olympia. But the same can be said for Dexter Jackson and Shawn Rhoden, Big Ramy trying to come up in here. There's a lot of other storylines that are bigger than Kai Greene. And by the way, Kai's absence does not diminish or tarnish this competition. It's bigger than any one athlete. Remember Flex Wheeler, 1994, got in a car accident, and he was the heir apparent in 93. And that contest is one of the still more talked about shows in 1994. The cream will rise to the top this weekend in absence of Kai Greene. Kai Greene's going to have to figure out what he wants to do with the rest of his career. This is a contest that gives and rewards the athletes that qualify and that compete. If you choose not to do that, someone else is going to step in and fill those shoes. And right now, Dennis Wolf and a number of people are going to step up.
I think, Peter, one of the reasons the attention has gone directly to Dennis Wolf on this one is because Dexter Jackson, who, by the way, we're going to talk about him in just a moment, hearing all sorts of great things about Dexter. He's 45 years old. Shawn Rhoden, hearing great things about Shawn Rhoden. Shawn just turned 40. Now, in the case of Dennis Wolf, he's the one guy who sort of has that thing in common with Phil Heath. And that thing that I'm referring to is the fact those are the 2 guys that are in their competitive prime. Dennis Wolf, 36 years old. Phil Heath, 34 years old. Those are the years when you start to see a physique, a world-class physique, become special. And when you look at Dennis Wolf and his progression, it seems like the consensus is that he's the one who's going to benefit most by the absence of Kai Greene.
Yeah, I think Dennis was 4th last year. He could have easily been 3rd, maybe 2nd. His problem has been once the prejudging starts, he's very full, and then he slackens off a little bit, goes flatter. He's telling us he's sorted that problem out. There is something in common with Dennis and Phil Heath in terms that I would term them both aesthetic freaks. Dennis is a big guy, but he's not a mass monster in the usual, here's the muscle, forget about the shape and the flowing lines. He's got some awesome shots. His front lat spread, his front bicep, he does make Phil not look so big in those shots. And then his back double biceps, which is always criticized by people, his back shots. I think he's got one of the best back double biceps in the world because of that lack of that narrow waist, that he doesn't have those thick lumbar region, so he gets this tremendous sweep and those big delts and those arms. So I think, if we go back to last year, Kai's out the contest. Well, he's been runner-up for the past 3 years. Well, yes, he has. But 3 years, Phil slammed the door on him. What's to make us think it would be any different this time? Kai's coming big, he's coming streamlined, he's coming in between, and it's not worked with Phil. Even last year when Phil was not at his best, I fully expect Phil to be maybe at his all-time best, certainly as good as 2011 this time out.
The physique that's really gotten some folks talking, though, is Dexter's, because it's remarkable. Dexter Jackson, 2008 Mr. Olympia. It's been 7 years, and we're still talking about him as a contender. He's going to be a guy who's going to be in that first call-out, and he's going to go toe-to-toe with Phil Heath. And when it comes to conditioning and preparation, there might not be anyone more qualified to go toe-to-toe with Phil than Dexter.
Well, this is his 15th Olympia, which is more than anyone in the history. 16th, which is more than anyone in the history. He's an Open Mr. Olympia winner, a Masters Olympia winner, and 5-time Arnold Classic champion, won the Australian Championships, won over in Madrid. Dexter does nothing but exemplify consistency. And if he's going to try now to push the envelope and come in 10 pounds heavier, he may not be the real crisp Dexter that we're used to seeing, but he could be that round, very full Dexter that we have yet seen, and that might propel him to be even more of a threat to the throne. And that would be a huge story if at 45 years old, on the eve of being 46, he knocks off a young champion like Phil Heath. That's a story in itself.
It's a remarkable story, and in the story of Shawn Rhoden now. Shawn Rhoden is that guy that we always tend to kind of put him on the back burner, and all he does is come in and year out and bring some of the most quality muscle that we've seen with these remarkable legs. And it's just, he's a physique that the fans have really come to embrace, because he brings something that really I think a lot of bodybuilders aspire to achieve. It's just a certain overall quality, and it's a look, and he's got a certain stage presence. He's not a dynamic physique. A lot of people feel like he doesn't have that thing that you need to be Mr. Olympia, and that might be true, but he certainly does bring a lot to the table.
Yeah, when he first walks out, the first thing that catches your eye is his shape, his narrow waist, those legs. It's a bodybuilder's physique, don't get me wrong, but it's a very athletic-looking physique. It's a very nice-looking physique. He looks like he can do things. He's not lumbering on there. We go back to Dexter at 45 and say, well, he's 40. Forget the 45. Dexter's just a freak of nature. This is his 74th contest. Miloš Sarcev and Chris Cormier did 72. That's the record. Dexter's won 22 contests. So there's no legislation for age. And Dexter Jackson, with Shawn, he's 40, but he's a young 40 in terms that he had 7 years out the game, in his 30s. So he's still relatively fresh. From pictures we've seen earlier in the year, he's brought up his back and chest. We'll see if that translates into contests. If he does that, he'll improve. And he's dangerous. They're all dangerous if they're in shape. Dexter, Dennis, Shawn, if they're cut and ripped and full, they're danger to anybody.
Now, on the topic of being dangerous, I caught up with Bob Ciccarello a few minutes ago, who was in the athletes meeting with you, and he informed me that Mamdou Alzbaye, Big Ramy, weighed in a few minutes ago. And by the way, it's worth mentioning that when you're not in the 212, you don't have to weigh in. But he weighed in. He weighed 316 pounds in shape.
Yeah, and no one is going to ask him how much he weighs from the judge's table. It's all a magic act. It's a smoke and mirrors illusion act. And if that translates into any kind of condition, he'll look like he's 370 pounds. It takes me back to 1988 when Rolf Mueller came in to the Mr. Olympia at basically 6'8" and over 300 pounds. It didn't translate to the stage because he was so tall. Big Ramy is 5'9" maybe? He is so compact and so dense. The one thing that we are waiting to see are the details. No one really cares how much he weighs. If he doesn't come in shape, the 316 pounds counts for nothing.
Yeah, and there's a couple of guys that I want to get at before, and we're going to be covering this event all weekend, so we're not going to be able to cover all the guys, but there's two names that I want to get to before we sort of put a bookmark in this portion of our coverage. One's Roly Winkler. and the other one's Branch Warren. Now, Roly Winkler came to Las Vegas a couple years ago, and he showed us something spectacular. He was 7th, could have been 6th. That was the year Jay finished 6th, and a lot of people felt that Roly could have actually been ahead of Jay. But Roly ended up showing us something really very impressive. He had the motorcycle accident, and then his career was sidetracked. Based on some of the reports we're hearing, this might be a little bit of the old Roly, the one that was starting to show us something. And if that's the case, he'll have a spot in the top 6.
Definitely, but just go back to Big Ramy, what Shawn was saying. The devil is in the details, and we're waiting to see the details from Big Ramy. And yeah, he was on the scales at 316, but what nobody saw was that Kenny Jones was in his side pocket. So back to Roly. Yeah, Roly at the Arnold this year, disappointing, midsection blown out and everything. But if he can come in with that midsection under control, with those arms, and we're talking biceps and triceps, delts, chest, he's a knockout, And like you say, he should have finished higher 2 years ago. If he can improve on that, he could be the shot guy that's going to break up this usual suspects top 6 that we've had for a few years now. He could be the one.
Some people have said Roly Winkler has the greatest arms in the history of this sport. And that's a sport, by the way, that includes Phil Heath and some really great arms. Branch Warren.
Again, I thought Branch Warren narrowly got here a couple of weeks ago in Atlantic City over a very athletically streamlined physique in Cedric McMillan. Still a promise. We're waiting to come in and be in shape. I think on this occasion, though, Branch is going to be standing up against some very athletic physiques that are even more genetically gifted than what he beat in Atlantic City by 1 point, I might add. And I don't know that there's a whole lot that Branch can do to his physique from Atlantic City that's going to make him more of a challenger here. Whereas Cedric McMillan, if he comes in 5% sharper, he beats Branch Warren. And I think there's enough pressure on Cedric McMillan to show up and produce that I actually have him placing ahead of Branch at this competition. And this may be Branch's last Mr. Olympia.
Well, it's one of the stories that we're following. So much buzz in the lobby. You make your way around the lobby of the Orleans Hotel, and people are talking about everything. They're talking about Phil's quest for number 5. Of course, they're talking about the absence of Kai Greene. They're also talking about the 212, which has become a real popular event here. Flex Lewis is here, and he's gunning for 4.
Yeah, and Flex is maxed out at 212 now. This has been his conundrum for the last couple of years. He has to train to keep within that body weight. And can he really improve? I mean, he can get more refined and everything. But, I mean, he wasn't really at his tip-top best last year. But when he is at his best, I think he's just too complete for the 212 guys we've got now. Jose Raymond will be very competitive. He'll bring that hardness, that graininess. And in some ways, he seems to have improved his shape a little. I know that seems, after all these years, he was called blocky and blocky. But at the Arnold, he sort of didn't give that impression anymore. So, and this class is always... We often get disappointed with the Open when we say, there's 20 guys and it's going to be the greatest Mr. Olympia ever. And then only 4 guys are in shape. The 212s, it's the other way around. There's maybe only 3 guys are not in shape in that class. They really bring that crisp condition.
Well, I think you nailed it, Peter. I feel that Flex is vulnerable. Flex Lewis is vulnerable at this contest. I think he's clearly the favorite. I don't think it's a sure bet that he wins for the reason you just said. It's not so much a shot at Flex Lewis to say that he's not going to win the show. It's really a celebration of how damn good that division has become. When you look at those guys in the top tier, the 5 or 6 guys that are chasing Flex, these guys are good. And that gap between the top and that next tier has really narrowed.
It's more so in the 212 than in the Open. In the Open, it's typically the winner and everybody else. 212, that gap is closing a little bit. I think that James is a veteran. He's experienced. As good as Jose Raymond is, I just don't think he's got the genetic gifts that Flex Lewis has. King Wong Kung, that guy's going to be a definite threat up there coming from Korea, an Arnold Classic amateur champion. Eduardo Correa, another anomaly in terms of condition. I'm not sure what the lineup is. I do know that this is James Flex Lewis's contest. It was designed for a guy like James. I think he has to do a whole lot to mess this up. I think right now he's going to walk out with number 4.
And I'd be remiss. We are talking about the Olympia 212. A year ago, an athlete named Baito Abaspor was here competing at the Olympia 212. We're 1 year removed, of course. News came in just a few weeks ago that Baito had passed away. And I know you talk about the things that are on the minds of bodybuilding fans this weekend, Peter. That's certainly one of the bigger stories as well.
Yeah, and as I understand it, there will be a moment's silence for Abaspor on Saturday night, so he will be remembered. You know, it's the last 2 years have been so memorable Olympias. You know, last year was the 50th, and we had all those celebrations. This year it's 50 years since the first one. 50 years this very month. You know, Larry Scott, who's no longer with us, the Brooklyn Academy of Music, he won the first title. So, there's been some fallen warriors along the way, and I think it's only right that he's remembered Abaspor in that way.
Certainly, and I know Joe and Ben Weeder would be proud to see how far this thing has come. The coverage here at the 2015 Olympia weekend is just getting underway, and musculardevelopment.com is going to be covering it every step of the way. And for Shawn Ray and Peter McGough, I'm Dan Soloman from musculardevelopment.com.